This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
There was a hormonal space rabbit. He escaped from the lab and then he got loose in here. He's got mood swings.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome everyone to Notes from the Edge, a sub-show of our Star Trek Discovery podcast, The Edge. I'm C Bryan Jones, or Chris, and I'll be your host as we flip through the pages of our notebook. In Notes from the Edge, we explore connections between Discovery and the greater Star Trek universe, which includes the prior 6 TV series and 13 films, as well as the massive literary universe, because there are elements from there that are being worked into the series. And we'll also delve deeper into some of the ideas unique to Discovery. I kick off each episode of Notes with my thoughts on the latest episode of Discovery, which this time means the first installment of Star Trek shorts, called Runaway. I'll cover 3 main points in the thoughts section: the format, the social message, as I perceive it, and the creative. Then, in the notes section, I'll explore avian and reptilian species seen in past Star Trek. Before I get into the story, let me start by praising Mary Wiseman. If you've been listening since the start of Discovery, you know that I was not initially a fan of Tilly. She grew on me as the first season went on, largely due to Wiseman's great performances, and by the end of the season, I came to really appreciate the character. But here, in Runaway, Wiseman is just brilliant. With all the spotlight on her, she brought to life the seriousness, the humor, and the emotion of the short story with incredible skill. From the uncertainty of decisions and frustrations of dealing with a parent, to damage control after a security breach, and nurturing a young woman in need of understanding and support. Wiseman had my attention throughout, and Tilly seemed completely real. It was great. Now, to the story itself, I had no idea what to expect going into these shorts. Would they bridge the gap between seasons 1 and 2, sort of how the Time 2 novel series bridges Insurrection and Nemesis? Would they just be filler to tide people over until next season and stop them from canceling their CBS All Access accounts until then? How much can you really do in 12 minutes? As it turns out, you can do quite a lot. By focusing on one character, the time is maximized and the story feels much longer than it is. Like a good science fiction short story, which is my favorite format of the genre, by the way, the brevity forces out clutter and makes for a very clear message. Runaway brings a lot of character growth to Tilly. She is having second thoughts about the command program. She is unsure that she can handle it. She's scared. This goes back to the character's original background and the lack of confidence that Burnham seemed to help her overcome. But it can be difficult to truly overcome such concerns about oneself, so it's not surprising that she might begin second-guessing her choice at this stage, particularly if Burnham isn't around. We don't know if that's the case, but we don't see her here. I was glad to see this because it would have been easy to just end the first season with her advancing to ensign, being honored for her service, and then have her stroll confidently into season 2. But real life doesn't usually work that way, and here we see a character who is dealing with the same struggles that we all deal with. At the start, we see Tilly's mom.
It's called the Command Training Program. It trains you for command.
Right. You know who I was just speaking about this with?
Me right now?
Your stepsister. She is always so smart about these things. Oh, honey, look at your desktop. You're just so clearly over-caffeinated.
It's fine.
Sweetie, you called for my advice. You know how you can get.
No, how can I get?
Sylvia, remember when you were a little girl at school and all the kids were climbing that wall and you just couldn't make it, so you ran away? It was so painful. And I don't want the command program to be like that for you. Anyway, I love you, and we'll talk soon.
This is something that went by me the first time. At first, it seemed that Tilly's mom was just sort of discouraging her in this scene, because we've gotten that impression from Tilly during season 1 that her mom is always on her case about something. You know, she doesn't like Tilly doing this or doing that. She doesn't like her hair. It's always something. But upon rewatch, I noticed the comment, "You called for my advice." And that makes a big difference once you get to the end of the short. The way in which Tilly helps Poe, and Poe helps Tilly, ties back to this line. I really like the idea of bringing in a character such as Poe, by the way, a woman younger than Tilly, who is struggling with a lack of confidence in taking on a big challenge, because it turns the Burnham-Tilly relationship around and forces Tilly into the role of mentor and counselor of sorts. And it does so just at the moment when she needs it in her own life. Listening to Poe and helping her through her problems is a way for Tilly to sort out her own situation. Tilly tells Poe that whatever is going on, she needs to let her in a little. This is a nice connection back to Tilly and Burnham at the start of season 1. Well, the context is for Kings, when Tilly and Burnham first meet, which for me is sort of the start of season 1, because I consider the Vulcan Hello and Battle at the Binary Stars to be a prologue. You know, really, Tilly needed Burnham and Burnham needed Tilly, and I think here what we see shows what Tilly learned through her interactions with Burnham. It adds depth to all those season 1 moments. Poe's situation mirrors Tilly's in a sense. Poe has run away because she isn't ready to become queen, to take on greater responsibility and leadership. Tilly isn't literally running away, but she is on the verge of figuratively doing so, as she has misgivings about committing to the command track. At the end, Poe asks her about this.
What did you mean about making a mistake before with the command training program?
Oh, I was just holding on to something dumb.
That's dumb.
That's gone.
You're going to be a great commander.
And that's the key. I think the primary purpose of this story is to advance the character of Tilly so that when season 2 starts, that uncertainty is gone. For us to buy into her as a real person, we need to see the flaws and not have them be portrayed as easily wiped away after season 1. I think we'll see a more confident Tilly in season 2 thanks to the encounter here with Poe. Now, there's a whole other interesting element to this story beyond Tilly's personal growth.
Did you know that Zahians are the only species that were born at the same time as our planet?
It's not possible. The temperatures would,
You have no idea what's possible. Zahians were born with our planet.
That means that you and your planet are...
Twins. Born at the same time. Grew up at the same time. There's always been a natural balance, a give and take.
The belief of the Zahians that they were born at the same time as their planet plays into some of the irrational beliefs that we find in our own world today, such as the flat earthers or the young earth creationists who believe our planet is only 6,000 years old. These beliefs are in direct contradiction to physical evidence, but are still held by some. Tilly tells Poe that it is scientifically impossible for her people to have been born at the same time as their planet, but that doesn't sway Poe. As commentary on how such beliefs can impact society, I find this interesting. It's one of the things that Star Trek and science fiction in general do best. But putting science aside for a moment, I also find the idea of a species and a planet being twins, as Poe puts it, to be interesting. Scientifically impossible? Yes. But what would such a relationship mean for the people and the planet?
After that, because of that, everything went crazy.
Yeah, maybe because you made Zahia the most politically irrelevant planet in the galaxy. You need a dilithium incubator? Are you freaking kidding me?
I built it because my planet is my twin sister. I spent so much time in the caves and I just wanted something to be just for her.
She goes on to explain how her people exploit Zahia and don't think about the future. Given that she sees the planet as her twin sister, this could be read as exploiting not just the environment, but also people. She tries to make others understand why this is not sustainable, but no one listens. This mirrors our own world very well. There are some who understand the importance of caring for the planet, actually many, I would say, and there are those who sound the alarm and push for change. There are even those who see Earth as a living, breathing organism in its own right. But you don't need to go to that extreme to understand that unchecked exploitation of the environment is unsustainable and will lead to a dead end, both for the planet and for us. This isn't the point of Runaway, of course, and there isn't enough time to explore it in the short, but it's an interesting idea, pairing the birth of a planet with the birth of an intelligent species and a leader who understands the importance of that symbiotic relationship, which of course is something that is sorely lacking in our own world. The concept, regardless of its scientific plausibility, could allow for powerful storytelling, especially when you throw in the fact that the planet is a source of dilithium, meaning it will be sought after by many races from many planets, making the care and preservation of which Poe speaks even more difficult. I'd also like to talk about the creative a bit. The first thing I noticed was that the ship interiors look beautiful. We open in a docking bay or a cargo bay, and it looks just fantastic. It feels slightly brighter, or at least clearer, as does the mess hall, and I love the dimming of the lights and the orange pylons reflecting off the gray floor. It's a beautiful color combination, especially as we approach Halloween. And there are nice little touches that build upon Discovery's first season, such as the photo of Tilly and Burnham and the mounted medal that Tilly received at the end of the season, both on display in her quarters. And I really like the design of the Zahians, too. This is, in my opinion, one of the more creative aliens to appear on Star Trek in a long time. Why do I say that? Poe looks almost human, right? In fact, she reminds me a bit of the Terra Nova colonists from the Enterprise episode Terra Nova. But there are subtle touches here that take her beyond the traditional bump-on-the-head humanoid of the week. These include the flicking inner eyelids, the clicking language, and obviously the ability to become invisible, although that has been done with the Jem'Hadar. The computer says that Poe is post-larval, indicating that either the Zahians are descended from insects or amphibians, or maybe birds or reptiles, if we want to get loose with the science and terminology, but follow the look, and therefore hatch from eggs, or they are at least different in form when young compared with adults and must undergo some sort of metamorphosis, although I don't really think that's what's happening here. The flicking eyes hint at some sort of reptilian heritage. I can't say for certain that this was the intention, and in some ways she almost seems bird-like, which, given that birds are descended from dinosaurs, makes sense. Her fingers also say avian to me, as they look like talons that evolved into digits, kind of stretched out, but they could also be claws, which could steer us back toward reptiles. Either way, there certainly seems to be some inspiration there, which is what I'll pick up on shortly when I get to the notes section. The language is also interesting, but the short format completely muddles it. Only Enterprise has really handled alien languages in a realistic way, but at least they give it a shot here. They do nod to the fact that aliens might have a very different way of communicating. Just after Tilly disarms Poe by hissing back at her, which was hilarious, by the way, not only Tilly's hissing, but also Poe's reaction, Poe begins to speak by clicking. Tilly quickly activates the universal translator, and we get spoken language that is at first muddled.
Tilly. I'm Tilly. What's your name?
My name is Keep Your Human Digits Off Me, please. It's a family name. My name is also, I could build a translator like that in my sleep. In fact, I did when I was 9.
Certainly on first viewing, it isn't clear whether Poe's clicks are being converted into spoken language, but the universal translator cannot properly interpret this yet, or whether she is actually speaking. I think it is the former, but to move the story along, we must switch to spoken language and shift to normal English, or Federation standard, as soon as possible. So while she is probably still clicking away, we switch to a more comfortable for us mode for dialogue for the sake of storytelling. If there's one thing that doesn't quite work for me in this short, it relates to that a little bit, and it is the way in which Poe goes from being essentially a wild animal to a very grounded, intelligent, and well-spoken person in the span of just a few minutes. Again, it's necessary to tell this story in this short format, but it does feel a bit strange. Maybe I would have played down the wild animal angle and just started her off as a frightened runaway. Then again, maybe she was pretending to be a wild animal to try to scare Tilly, sort of a defense mechanism. But anyway, quickly getting us to normal interaction without technobabble sets the stage for what makes this story great. It is like a stage play. This is something it shares with episodes such as Duet on Deep Space Nine or Shuttlepod 1 on Enterprise. When you strip things down to just 2 characters, and there's really nothing other than the dialogue between the 2 of them, you focus on their interaction, and therefore the power of the story and the power of the message is amplified. That especially happens here about 2/3 of the way through when Tilly and Poe discuss the planet Zahia, the relationship between the planet and its inhabitants, and even as we gain insight into Tilly's own internal turmoil. So, as with the environmental element, I'd also like to see more done with the language concept here, but there isn't enough time. Those small quibbles aside, I thought this was a superb story that was wonderfully acted by both Wiseman and Yadira Guevara Prip that delivers big things in a small package. Very high quality work all around, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the next short. All right, that's all I have for the thoughts section. Let's move on to notes. Because Poe looks as if her race could be descended from birds, I thought it would be interesting to refresh our memories on how many sentient avian species have been shown in past Star Trek. I may have been influenced by the fact that Morris Day in the Times' 1984 hit The Bird was playing as I prepared the outline for this episode, but I'm going to stick with some of the design cues I see in Poe as being the inspiration. Okay, birds, smart birds. Smart birds in Star Trek. There aren't that many, actually, and perhaps the first to come to mind is one that was already extinct by the time they entered our story, the Xindi Avians.
If they had made us the dominant species before the wars, our home world would still exist.
And our avian brothers would still fill the skies.
We should be grateful that the Guardians have finally come to their senses.
Those are Xindi Reptilians talking in the Enterprise 3rd season finale 0 Hour. And here is the Xindi arboreal scientist Jannar speaking to Degra and Archer 2 episodes earlier in the Council.
The Avians. Once they darkened the skies of Xindis with their numbers. We formed the Council to prevent other Xindis from sharing their fate.
Your Council just might have the opposite effect.
Perhaps not. There might be a way to convince them.
But avian aliens go back long before Enterprise, all the way back to the very first episode of Star Trek, the rejected original series pilot The Cage, in which a humanoid bird is being held captive by the Talosians. There's another similar bird in Trelane's collection in The Squire of Gothos. That prop actually is the bird from the cage, modified a bit. 2 avian species appear in the animated series, the first of which are the Aurelians, represented by Federation historian Loum Alik Om in the famous episode Yesteryear, the second episode of the series. Here is Alik, voiced by James Doohan, with Kirk and Spock near the Guardian of Forever at the start of Yesteryear.
We were scanning recent Vulcan history.
What time period?
20 to 30 Vulcan years past.
Was there any notation on the death of Ambassador Sarek's son?
Yes. The boy is recorded as dying during the maturity test.
The Cos-1. A survival test traditional for young males.
The date was...
the 20th day of Tasmin.
Aurelians are also mentioned in the literary universe in 2 of Christopher L. Bennett's Department of Temporal Investigations novels, 2011's Watching the Clock and 2012's Forgotten History. Deep Space Nine, the Federation-built version, also does the bird in David R. George III's Sacraments of Fire from 2015. The other avian species seen on the animated series is the score, which are at the center of the story of The Jihad, a Star Trek cartoon about a religious artifact and a holy war. The score also turn up in 3 novels: the 1991 novelization of the TNG episode Unification by Jerry Taylor, 2002's Cathedral by Andy Mangels and Michael A. Martin, the 3rd book in the 4-part Mission Gamma series, and 2007's Enterprise novel The Good That Men Do, also by Mangels and Martin. Lastly, if we jump ahead to the motion picture, we see an avian species called Betelgeusians. There are 3 of them at Starfleet headquarters when we see Kirk arriving, and there is also one aboard the Enterprise. I like to think this is a nod to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Ford Prefect, but I'm not sure if that's the case. The 2 came about at almost the same time. The original Hitchhiker's radio drama on BBC4 aired in 1978, and the Betelgeusians of Star Trek The Motion Picture were unveiled in 1979, 6 months before the film's release. Mego even put out a Betelgeusian action figure in 1980. Remember that? So, it may just be coincidence here. But a Betelgeusian also turns up in Christopher L. Bennett's TOS movie-era novel, Ex Machina from 2005, serving aboard the Enterprise, and this is actually the same science officer we see in the motion picture aboard the Enterprise, and he appears again in Bennett's Forgotten History. One more thought. If you fast forward to the end of the TNG films, I feel like the design of the Remans could have been inspired by the Betelgeusians. I don't think so, but I do see similarities in their faces. There's also a bit of reptile in Poe's look, and past Star Trek gives us a lot more to reflect on here. Of course, there's the Gorn, the Voth from Voyager's Distant Origin, the Xindi Reptilians from Enterprise, the Cardassians, the Jem'Hadar, and O'Brien's buddy Tusk. But there are quite a few more. You're probably familiar with the Saurians, mainly because of their brandy. It's pretty good, I hear. And if you want a cigar to go with that brandy, you can get one from the aforementioned Betelgeusians, although these aren't known as being the best of the rolled space tobaccos, according to the Star Trek Corps of Engineers book, The Art of the Comeback, written by Glenn Greenberg in 2007. Anyway, you can spot a Saurian aboard the Enterprise in Star Trek The Motion Picture. He's a science officer. I love the way this species is described by Robert Fletcher, who together with Fred Phillips created them along with other alien species for the motion picture. He said, Saurian, a lizard person, very able, excellent space officers. Well, there you go. You know you're in good hands with a Saurian on the crew. They are most excellent space officers. Plus, this is important, as Fletcher also pointed out, they can, quote, breathe a number of gases. Awesome. In Star Trek Online, a Saurian served as Federation president, and they, or their tasty beverage, are mentioned in many novels, including John Bornholt's The Genesis Wave, Book 1, published in 2000, Bennett's Ex Machina, his 2008 TNG novel Greater Than the Sum, and his 2013 Rise of the Federation novel, A Choice of Futures, which of course takes place just after the end of Enterprise. You'll also find Saurians in David Mack's 2004 novel A Time to Kill, which was the 7th book in that series, his 2010 Vanguard novel Reap the Whirlwind, and Second Nature, his Star Trek Seekers installment from 2014, which was book 1 of that series. The Saurians are also at the center of Amigo Mix-Up. In 1980, the toy company released a 3 3/4 inch Saurian action figure that it labeled as a Rigelian, the next reptile on our list. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, we glimpse the Rigelians, who are actually turtles that evolved into a sentient species. They are, again, mentioned in the 2nd season Enterprise episode Cogenitor, and in the 4th season episode United, we see a Rigelian ship for the first time. We finally see actual Rigelians as part of the talks about the formation of the coalition of planets that spans Demons and Terra Prime, the real 2-part series finale of Enterprise. The name Rigelian has been used for a number of species in Star Trek, by the way, so don't get confused. The ones we're talking about here are also known as Shellons or Shellarians, a name that was established in the books, and are native to Rigel 3. In the literary universe, they turn up in David Mack's Mere Mortals from 2008, the 2nd book in the Destiny series, and in Christopher L. Bennett's 2014 Rise of the Federation novel Tower of Babel. The Vanguard Station from the popular series of the same name by David Mack, Dayton Ward, and Kevin Dillmore had a Shellon ambassador, and Riker had a Shellon biologist serving with him aboard the USS Titan. Speaking of the Titan, there's a reptilian species there that was never seen on screen and in an important role. The ship's chief medical officer is a Pakwa Thon from the planet Pakwa Majoris, which joined the Federation in 2360, which is the same year Gul Dukat took command of Terok Nor, just to put it on the timeline for you. This was a level of crew diversity that I was really fascinated by when that first Titan book came out, and it's one that I remember thinking could only really be explored in the novels, at least at that time, because Dr. Ree really resembles a dinosaur, and at that point in time, I just couldn't see them doing that on television, and that was a position that I held for many years. But now, like seeing what they do with Saru, even though I know that's prosthetics, but seeing what they do on Discovery, coupled with the visual effects of today and how that has become something that can be worked into a budget, I think they might actually be able to do Dr. Ree week to week should the Titan become a live-action series. Well, moving on, the Saleh are another reptilian species that got some good airtime when a delegation of them traveled aboard the Enterprise D in the first season episode Lonely Among Us. They also can be seen in Season 3's Menage a Troy and Season 6's Tapestry. Saleh references also turn up in the 1995 Deep Space Nine novel Arcade by Diana G. Gallagher, the 2011 Vanguard novella The Stars Look Down by David Mack, and the 2015 Titan novel Sight Unseen by James Swallow. Another reptilian species is the Arconians, seen in the 2nd season Enterprise episode Dawn. They are also mentioned in Michael A. Martin's Enterprise novel The Romulan War to Brave the Storm from 2011, and 2 of Christopher L. Bennett's Rise of the Federation novels, A Choice of Futures and Tower of Babel, published in 2013 and 2014, respectively. And then there are the Katati, a reptilian species from the Delta Quadrant seen in the Voyager episode Day of Honor, and also, and don't ask me how she got there, playing Dabo in Quarks in the 6th season Deep Space Nine episode, One Little Ship. In the 2nd season Voyager episode Parturition, there's an unnamed reptilian species, to which the baby that Tom Paris and Neelix rescued belongs. We get to see the mom near the end, and interestingly, this alien shows up 3 more times as Voyager makes its way across the Delta Quadrant. In Random Thoughts from Season 4, Infinite Regress from Season 5, and Tukanse from Season 6, because apparently they are big fans of space wrestling. Another unnamed reptilian species appeared in the animated series in the episode The Jihad, along with our score friends mentioned earlier. The character's name was Sword, S-O-R-D, but his species was not named. That changed in 2000 when Michael Jan Friedman established the species name as Gnalish when he started his Stargazer series of novels. Figus Simenon is the reptilian chief engineer serving under Picard aboard the Stargazer. There's one other reptilian appearance in the animated series in the episode Bem. The natives of Delta Theta 3 are some sort of reptile, but there's not a lot more to say about their origins. Moving on, if you look closely, you can spot the Kashita, an orange-skinned, big-headed reptile sitting among the Federation Council members during Kirk's trial in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. The FASA RPG module, Star Trek IV Sourcebook Update, expanded quite a bit on this species, so there's a lot of detail about them, including the fact that they are big on gift-giving. Another Picard lizard connection comes in the form of the Tigerians, a reptilian species seen in the bar on the 7th season TNG story Gambit. Actually, this species first appeared on Deep Space Nine in The Homecoming, which aired about a month before Gambit, and it was seen quite a few times after that on DS9, in Season 2's The Homecoming and Cardassians, Season 3's The Abandoned, Season 4's Body Parts, and Season 5's Trials and Tribulations. And, as Steve Jobs would have said, there's one more thing. Or at least one more lizard. This comes from the 3rd season Enterprise episode, Raijin, where there's a mention of a species called Utani.
Radhud said you might be able to help us.
I always welcome referrals. What is your pleasure?
We were told you've recently done business with some Zindi.
Excellent customers. They purchased 2 Utoni serpent women. I'm afraid I don't have any more, but perhaps I could interest you in a Nuvian concubine.
We can assume they are reptilian based on the reference to serpent women, but maybe it means something else. Alright, so those are the notes from the Edge for the first episode of Star Trek Shorts. If you'd like to share your thoughts on Runaway and the points I've covered here, the best place to do that is in the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. You can also find us on Twitter at TrekFM is our username there, or you can send us email using the contact form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Just choose to send to a show and choose the Edge, and that will come to me by email. If you'd like to find me personally, you can find me there in the Babel Conference, of course, but perhaps the best place to converse with me is Twitter. My username there is C Bryan Jones, the letter C, and Bryan with a Y, and that's my name pretty much everywhere in social media. If you'd like to hear me discuss Star Trek Beyond Discovery, you can catch my main show, The Ready Room, where I'm often joined by my good friend Larry Nemeczek, or Dr. Trek, as many of you know him. And I also co-host The Orb, our Deep Space Nine podcast with Matthew Rushing. You'll also hear me on lots of older episodes from various shows, as I used to host about 7 shows a week here on the network back a few years ago, and you can find my writing about Star Trek on the official website over at StarTrek.com. Oh, one more thing I've been doing recently, depending on when you hear this, if you're going through the back catalog, I'm making my way back through Deep Space Nine again, just to kind of refresh my memory on things, and I'm live tweeting that as I go. So it's a bit spotty. Some weeks I can watch quite a bit, and some weeks I can't watch much at all. It really varies from day to day. But if you're interested in my thoughts on Deep Space Nine, follow me on Twitter. Again, the username is C Bryan Jones, letter C and Bryan with a Y. and you can follow along as I go. And I'm also helping resurface some of the old episodes of The Ready Room and The Orb that tie into the episodes that I'm watching as I go through the rewatch. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you as I go through that if you want to follow me on Twitter and then tweet back at me as I'm going through, and I'll respond to you. All right. I'd like to take a moment here before I close out and thank our associate producers of The Edge. These are the people that really make it possible for us to get not only this show, but everything that we do on the network out to you guys, because it does cost a lot of money to produce, host, and distribute our content. So I'd like to thank Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Tom Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, and Cornelia Reutner. These are patrons who have chosen The Edge as one of the shows where they want their associate producer credits. You get associate producer credits as a patron depending on your level, and it could be one show or it could be more. If you would like to find out how to do that, just go to patreon.com/trekfm for all the details. That's patreon.com/trekfm. Everything's listed out there for you. But again, guys, I really appreciate your support. It really makes a huge difference. You don't know, I'm not just saying that. It really would not be possible for us to push these podcasts out to your phones and your tablets and your computers without this support. So thank you so much. If you're not yet a patron, I do hope you'll go check it out. It means a lot, not only to me, but all the hosts on the network who do all the shows that you listen to and that you love. Well, that's all I have for this time. Thank you so much for listening. Join me in a month when Calypso airs, and we jot down more notes right on the paper's edge.